Hello, welcome to my channel, The Inclusion Crowd. My name's Ed and today's video is an absolute corker. I got the chance to do a Zoom interview with a guy called Ben Brenkert from his apartment in New York yesterday. Ben is an ex-Jesuit. Jesuits are a type of Catholic priests and he was in the process of being ordained, but he was openly gay, and in fairness to him, he had been openly gay with them throughout the whole process. He's just written a tell-all autobiography about his experiences growing up in a Catholic family in New York, to joining the Jesuits, to leaving them on the basis that they sacked LGBT members of staff, they censored him, and so on. So he couldn't take it anymore, and that's the reason. That's the reason for his book. But we're all the better for it because wow, does he lift the lid on everything from sex between priests to falling in love with other priests to the hypocrisy of the teachings of Jesus versus what the institution of the Catholic Church is saying. It's all in there. So I asked him some pretty tough questions, and to be fair to him, he answered them all. So I tip my cap to him. I hope you enjoy the video as much as I did making it. Of course, if there's any suggestions or any of your feedback, stick them in the comments below. And Ben's well up for doing any Q&As or any live experiences later on. So again, if you're up for that, just reach out on either his or my socials. So I really hope you enjoy the video, and I'll speak to you later.
The point is, it's really very trite and too obvious and too weak, really, very weak. Like if you're a Roman Catholic and you're going to Leviticus, why are you following Jesus? And yes, if you're a closeted gay person who's a priest, you are being cowardly. Gay men and lesbians are intrinsically disordered, like so many other closeted gay priests do. Well, I don't care. People are getting fired because they're gay and lesbian. During the sort of the hardcore interviews, because you have like 5 interviews, then a 5-hour long interview. And one of the interviewers was asking me like what sexual position I preferred. He asked me, did you prefer to be active or passive? And he actually said, did you prefer to be a top or a bottom? I can turn a blind eye to it. But I wasn't going to do that.
So I'm here with Ben Brenkert, who has just written the book, The Catechism of the Heart. Ben, I can't wait to talk to you about the book. I couldn't put it down. But instead of me introducing you, why don't you tell us who you are, what's brought you to this point, and why you've written the book?
Yeah, so I am Ben Brenkert. Ed, it's nice to speak with you, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to spend time with you to talk about this project, which is a project many years in the making, and it's finally able to be, it's available to the world, the English-speaking world for now. The project came about after I left the Society of Jesus in 2014 in protest of the firing of lesbian and gay volunteers and employees from Roman Catholic institutions. And that practice continues to this day, despite the US Supreme Court creating or making a ruling that sexuality is not a reason for firing someone from a job. So it's a protected class under the US Constitution.
Right. And we call that a protected characteristic here in the UK, but it's the same thing. It's
yes,
a protected group of people and so on.
Yes.
So why don't we go back to the beginning then before
Sure.
we get into the details of the book. So where did you grow up? What was that like? And the period before you entered the priesthood.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very Catholic family in Long Island, New York, really much more Roman Catholic than Italian or German or Polish, which were my heritages. And so I made my way through the rites of passage for any Roman Catholic child or family. And that included, weekend attendance at the liturgy. That included going through all of the sacraments and receiving them on time with no lapse. And just observing my family, my parents primarily, sort of develop their prayer life, their ritual life, their way of being, and observing sort of their formation as sort of older pre-Vatican II Roman Catholics. And I do have 3 sisters and 1 brother, and there's kind of an age difference. My youngest sister is 8 years older than me, so I am the baby, but I certainly felt more like I was growing up as an only child, only because of the age difference. For instance, my brother was out of our house by 1986, so I would have been 6 years old when he left the house.
When did that transition happen from being a Catholic in a Catholic family to then thinking, actually, I want to join this movement, I want to be a priest?
And so I would find myself involved and engaged in the church. I was teaching CCD by a certain age. I was working at the rectory at a certain age. I was there as a Eucharistic minister. So I was growing more and more kind of deeper into the church and growing more and more deeper into my faith and what I considered my relationship with the God that I was coming to understand. And so along that way, at about age 13, 14, I was aware that I was different. I was aware that, I perhaps liked, boys and was attracted to members of the same sex. And so, I after an experience with one of my peers around age 14, I did sort of have a conversation with my sister. What happened was something that kind of charted a different course. And I did, subsequent to that conversation, I did try to come out to my family for the first time. So that would have been like 1994. And, and that was not a good experience. There were some slanders, and my mom and my youngest sister, did say, well, if you want to be gay, you'll burn in hell, and that kind of stuff. And that really struck a chord with me. So what does any sort of kid who's frightened do? You pick one or the other. You pick at 14, go closer to your family, or try to be more flamboyant and more sort of renegade. And for me, I chose the closeness to my family and proximity to those who loved me, because I was so young. I was 14, and I didn't, have any I wasn't that type of kid that said, well, I'll run away. That wasn't even on my radar. And so, so then I sort of withdrew and simultaneously went sort of more into the closet, and also sort of, again, deeper into responding to the needs of the church. And so I continued to get more and more involved. So, a couple of years passed, and then I would say for me, sort of the seed that's planted is by the on loan Sri Lankan priest at my parish of the Blessed Sacrament. And he sees me kind of doing all of these things in the church, and I'm there a lot. And he comes up to me, I think I'm on a ladder decorating something, or, passing supplies to people for decorating for one of the big festivals of the holiday. And he says, you should really consider being a priest. And, at that point I said to myself, well, what the hell does that mean? I'm pursuing this relationship with this girl, and I'm, confused about my sexuality, and now I have to consider a vocation. And so, but really that is the question that kind of got me going, the sense that, someone saw something in me that could be priestly. Someone saw in me something that could be sacramental, so that I could be a role model or an example for others, and do what I always saw these priests doing at the Church of the Blessed Sacrament, which was, exploring the relationship of a God who loves everyone, sort of an inclusive God, not a catechetical God. Never really, the sermons at my parish when I grew up as a child were never like you know, 1 + 1 is 2. It was never sort of matter of fact. It was sort of God was beyond the realm of fact and sort of all encompassing and all inviting. And the idea was to see how you could live a good life and how to be a better person. So, so I went to Marist College, and there, that's really where I really started walking more closely with God, with Jesus, and really, developing that sort of personal relationship with both of them, while also kind of having in the back of my mind, what does it mean to be gay? What does it mean to be gay and Catholic? Over time, sort of what becoming a public figure in the church meant. And so that brings me to sort of where I was in my undergraduate years.
When I realized later than you that I was gay, but when I did, it was very clear to me that the Catholic Church wasn't a safe haven, wasn't a safe harbor. I'm really interested from your perspective that as you're going through that journey, you continued to see it as such, and I wonder if you could just elaborate a bit on that.
When I was at Marist, the idea is, well, where is my fit? And so I started to look at religious orders, and I looked primarily at the Marist fathers, because again, my vocation, I didn't have a sense that I was called to brotherhood. I didn't have a sense that I was called to, non-sacramental life. My calling, what I heard in my prayer was, you are called to the priesthood, to be sacramental, to do the Eucharist, to do the sacraments. And so I looked at the Marist fathers, not the Marist brothers. I looked at the Franciscans, and I sort of looked a little bit at the Jesuits at the time, because I was a history major, and so I learned about the Jesuits' work and the missionaries and in sort of the world of Asia.
So when we talk about Catholic priests and all that sort of stuff, you're describing a number of different types of roles, if you like, within different orders, different approaches, different flavors, but all the same side.
Yeah, because I don't think what people realize is, different orders, different types of priests, they do different types of work. And so of the three that I mentioned, they all have elements of sort of, education, but sort of the Jesuits are considered sort of apostolic. They're considered sort of the monastery is the city instead of the monastery on the hill. And so, that's why Jesuits have multiple sort of roles. Like one might be a chemist and a priest, or one might be a professor of theology and a priest, or one might be a professor of history and a priest, or one might work with gangs and be a priest, which is something very, different from sort of, again, sort of the role of just a local priest who's in the parish and doing the parish sort of role as sacrament and, faith formation.
And so you were attracted to the Jesuit.
Well, actually, initially, I printed out the stuff from my dorm room, my dorm room or townhouse room at the time, and and then like 10 minutes later, I was ripping all of it up because I thought they'll never accept me. The Jesuits are like the top of the top, and the creme de la creme, and I just said I don't think it will work out, because I had never met a Jesuit. So what did I know? I only knew what was on paper, and everything that I read on paper seemed so impressive. And
at this time, so you're at college, were you identifying as gay, or were you still unsure, or where were you at?
I would say sort of as I became more comfortable with my friends, I believe that I could say that I was more able to be myself sexually, and by way of sexually, I mean by being able to sort of identify myself as gay. Certainly that didn't happen my freshman year, and then by 2001, sort of September 11th happened, and for an American or a New Yorker, as I was, sort of, I felt that September 11th, for all of its horrors, really said to me, well, fuck it, you live once, you have one life, and I'm going to be me as God created me. I'm going to be this gay man who has a relationship with God, and no one is going to, whether I'm trying to date or trying to resolve this discernment to see where I am, no one can judge the fact that, I might have dated while pursuing the resolution of this question,
So you
and I don't see the
were,
two mutually exclusive. I don't say, and for anyone that is discerning, I would say you should definitely date and figure out what intimacy is, because unfortunately the Roman Catholic Church has this rule of celibacy. And so once you're in the priesthood, you're supposed to be celibate. And really,
I'm gonna talk to you a lot about
okay,
celibacy and some of the rules
yeah,
and all of that. What I'm keen is the timeline. So you came out at 14 to your
hmm
family and it went badly.
yeah.
And then
Then I tried to come out in 2001. So the second time was 2001, and that went badly. And it was badly in a different way. It was badly in the fact that my mother, she sort of stopped talking to me for a period of time.
so
And so,
when you came out to them when you were 14,
yeah.
did they think it went away? What do you mean you came out again when you were 21?
Yeah, so that's an interesting kind of thing. Not many people can say, well, ultimately I came out 3 times, to my family. So, one was sort of, the 14 and the burning in hell. Then there was, September 11th, I came out on Thanksgiving, November 2001, and my mother stopped speaking to me. However, my dad still, sought relationship with me. So I was very surprised by that, and I had always kind of saw for me like God as Abba, Father, and that was sort of an amazing kind of thing that my dad, he came to my final band concert for the winter because I played the saxophone in the Marist band, and I was surprised that he was there and not my mom. And ultimately my mom, she sort of came around and did resume our relationship, which is very fortunate for me because she and my father were both amazing people. um, and without them I would not have anything. And so that was sort of the second time that I came out, in 2001. um, so you know sort of ending sort of the college experience, I was looking at where to go next, sort of having sort of some but not many, and not many successful relationships with men, but also this lingering sort of discernment. And anyone who sort of talks about discernment always says the question never goes away. Once you have the question, um, it's something that has to be resolved. And um, and that's what discernment is. Discernment is sort of taking a question to God, or the person that people look to for faith, and sort of posing that question to God, and asking for help and guidance in resolving it or making an answer, so that you can elect a decision with God's confirmation of the answer, right? So all that to say, I'm newly out, sort of having a better sense that my family would be semi more sort of positive about my coming out. Definitely didn't want to enter the Marist Fathers, though I could have entered them. So at 18, I could have entered the Diocese of Raffles Center. At 22, I could have entered the Marist Fathers, but chose not to because that fit wasn't right. And so I went to social work school. And so from 2002 to 2003, I was in social work school, but I was really, for the first time, really sort of exploring and really trying to like navigate the gay world. I was going to gay bars, I was dancing, I was doing that kind of thing. And you're 22, your priorities are wrong. But, I think my sense was I was trying to figure out who it is that God wants me to be, and I think that's really the question, for all of my time and sort of in my discernment. Who does God want you to be? And so, I met this guy, and I sort of dated him for a while, but that relationship sort of led me to sort of a bottom, sort of for the first, there are many bottoms in our lives, many joys and many bottoms, many highs and lows. And so with him, I experienced sort of a real desert moment. I left social work school, and I just found myself like trying to like climb back to sort of a homeostasis, a balance, and because by that time I had left sort of discernment. I said, I'm going to put this to the side. I was still kind of going to church, but I wanted to really have an opportunity to figure out who it was that God was making me, and who God wanted me to be fully. So, it's 2003, it's the summer, and again, sort of be a priest, sort of, it just comes, and then it comes when you don't want it to come. And it's an amazing kind of question that comes from the pit of your stomach. And it's never at a time when you want it to come. So I had been on like, diocesan retreats with bishops, and I had been wined and dined, and I've, know what it means to go on a dinner date essentially with a vocation promoter. And, and I said, I really don't want to do any of that, because that's just more noise. And I don't want, I've got this thing going on where I'm trying to figure out, my sexuality and be healthy. I'm trying to figure out, what the answer of this vocational call is. If I go to any vocation promoter, they're just going to try to convince me that I've got a vocation, or that I don't have a vocation. So I said, I'm going to...
I didn't know such a thing existed. It's a bit like Army Recruiter, is it? Is that a...
Yeah, it really is, but the tools are different. A vocation promoter is really going to be using the tools of discernment and the tools of listening and active listening. And, clearly if you're going up to him and saying, I have a vocation, but you're, going out every night and doing everything that someone wouldn't be doing, that's a priest candidate, then clearly you don't have a vocation. But if you go to him, and every time you go to him, you have more data, more information to share about what you've tried to do and what, because it's not an exact science, discernment, it's not like, doing the quadratic equation, so, the hard data is prayer, and what you're actually doing, so like if you're, working at the food pantry or distributing communion, that's a good sign that you might have a vocation, essentially. So I did sort of a private discernment, and I said, I'm going to sort of I'm going to talk to God. I'm going to do this for 6 months. And if I still have like, feedback that I should pursue this, well, then I'm going to write someone.
And because it's a natural way of life. You'd come out, it had been shit. It was hard.
Yeah.
You got to college. You were finding yourself. You were expressing yourself. You found a relationship. You were sexually active. You were doing all the normal college stuff. And then you were thinking about switching all of that off. The relationships, the sexual activity, the party, the all of those things that you had just finally found.
I mean, and I wouldn't say like I mean, what can I say? I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. If those things were more positive, would I have gone a different way? Well, obviously Robert Frost's famous poem is famous for a reason, right? You always are electing a way, like even Saint Ignatius of Loyola, he elected a way. He was at a fork, and he asked God, if I go this way, I'm going to kill someone, and if I go this way, I'm going to work for the church, and basically he went the way of the church, and look at what happened. So but I would caution against like anyone who said, well, you were running away, and because you only can go by what data you have, and the data that I had was about what I write about for my doctorate in education at Columbia University, which is about human flourishing. And so when I took to prayer, sort of, where I was flourishing, where I was happiest, it was when I was thinking about priesthood, and it was where I was thinking about vocation. So I wrote this Jesuit on Long Island, and I said, I'm Ben, I'm gay, I've had relationships, I've had sex, sort of essentially, not in all the gory details, but look, this is who you're getting. This is who I am. I am not running away from my sexuality. That's not what my prayer is telling me. I am coming to, I would like to meet with you just to say, let me meet a Jesuit in person and let's see what happens. And so he wrote me and he said, great, let's meet. And that was basically it. And that's how it started in 2004, like December, January.
Where I give you real kudos and where I got a lot of respect from you from reading your book was that point that you, from the very beginning, did not hide. In fact, you told them, as you've just described, this is what you're getting in your work.
Yeah.
Do you still want to chat? Do you,
yeah.
Call it? Is it dead at this point because this is who I am, or is it
right.
got a future and is it worth us exploring?
Because I knew what the church said, and my mom had read. I gave her a copy of "Always Our Children," which was like I think 1996 statement. And I don't think there's been it's 1996 "Always Our Children," which was only for like the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I don't know if England has sort of a UK version, or another country has like a Spanish or Chinese or whatever version of "Always Our Children," contemporaneous to your culture. But "Always Our Children" was like USCCB's statement about like how parents are supposed to embrace their homosexual child. But it also goes into the, sort of the details of, they're supposed to be chaste, they're supposed to be this, and, to be happy must be celibate, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, like you said, I was not being shy, and I wanted to be as bold as possible because I also wanted to use that as data to say, well, I have nowhere to go with this vocation, all of the doors have been closed. But the Jesuits, or that priest, who's no longer alive, he invited me to come and see him. So he was the first Jesuit I met. And
were you surprised at that? Did you think you were going to get no, you're a big screaming queen and you definitely
yeah. I didn't know what I would get, but I was sort of satisfied. I would say I was satisfied in the openness and the reception.
I was surprised. I thought that was really cool. And I think, and I'm skipping forward, but I think that became the wedge that pushed you apart, because you, from that very moment, were open and transparent.
Yeah.
They invited you in on that basis. So a contract had been made essentially to say, let's start a journey, let's invest my time, let's,
I remember like, there are a couple of things that are kind of funny. Like, now they're funny. I remember like, sort of you go through this rigorous kind of, sort of dating of the order kind of experience, because you can't just like go and apply. You always have to, like I said, you have to kind of show that you're growing and that you're a fit with the spirituality, right? Like, in other words, if you're going to the Jesuits and you're sort of showing more of a, sort of a fervor or a desire to be with the poor and to live very simply, and to be in a much more sort of communal life, well, they might say, well, you may have a vocation, you should go check out the Franciscans, so, the idea here is that by the time I got to sort of the, sort of the sort of hardcore kind of interviews, I had set up like a men's discernment group with another gay man, who was going on weekends with me, and where we went and where we had this meeting, though he kind of fell back from sort of leading it and I was sort of facilitating it, we would always talk about our sexuality, and because I think we wanted to be honest and sort of each other's sort of reflection that we were not running away from something. because that's very important, and because I would caution anyone, the seminary has been a place for gay men to hide. And there are gay men that are in the priesthood that are afraid of their own shadow, but, sort of that was not something that I wanted to do.
And I think
So,
that's really brave.
yeah, the second thing, just to you hear, like the second thing was like, there were two things. One was sort of during the sort of the hardcore psych interviews, because you had like 5 interviews, then a 5-hour long interview. And one of the interviewers was asking me like what sexual position I preferred. He asked me, did you prefer to be active or passive? And he actually said, did you prefer to be a top or a bottom? And, and this was, yeah, in the interview. And this was a very catty gay man. Yeah, no, well, the interview actually took place in New York City, but, this was a guy who was a layman who worked with the Society of Jesus. And, he's asking me, are you sort of a gay, are you a top or a bottom? And I said to myself, like, that's sort of kind of a stupid question to be asking, but I think the idea, I think for them is to get the data to see how comfortable you are and, with your sort of sense of self. But again, like, as you look at what the church is doing, here you have a gay man aspiring to be a priest in the Society of Jesus, and you have a gay layperson kind of tongue-in-cheek, do you like being a bottom or a top? And I just think it's kind of a funny thing. And then the second kind of funny thing was when I, had to call my novice master before I entered the Society of Jesus. And I was on the phone with him in my backyard, and Ballysheen is very close to JFK. So a lot of the planes fly over. So I'm like, and there's like new cell phones, and I'm trying to like talk to him about like, hey dude, I'm going to meet you. You're not really in control of my life right now, but soon you will be. And, you'll be helping me to figure out this vocation. But I wanted, I'm calling you because I need you to tell me if I can publish this gay education theory paper that I wrote that my social work professor at Hunter College wants me to publish with him, and do you think that's a good idea? And, and sort of quiet on the end of the other side of the phone, like, what's the answer going to be? And it was kind of funny because, like, here I am sort of throwing myself out to him saying, look, I'm a gay guy. I've got this theoretical paper that I could get published. I could be like an academic. I don't have to do this, but I want you to know, and he said, you should not have it published. So I didn't.
There's a couple of things in there, isn't there? First of all, if somebody was approaching the priesthood and had talked about being sexually active, I wonder, would they have asked them what their favorite positions would have been when they were sexually active? And I think that was specifically because you were identified as gay.
Right. I wonder, like, clearly if you're a heterosexual person, there's no need to ask, are you passive or
No, but do you like it,
right,
Mary,
right.
or do
Right.
It's an intimate question, isn't it, that they asked you?
Yeah.
So they could be under no illusion that you were definitely
Right, exactly.
a man.
Right.
And that second bit then, so as you're progressing, you're doing your social work stuff and you can publish this paper. So
Yeah.
it sounds like they are on the one hand saying, yes, we accept that you are gay and all of that sort of stuff. You're then saying, well, actually, as part of my social work stuff, I want to write a paper on it. And they're saying no.
Right.
So what was that your first experience of the two sides of this coin then?
Well, I mean, I think in a sense, like, I think it was the first time that, well, now I can say it looking back, but not then. I think now I can say that, I think because being, and I would never privilege this now, but it's my way of saying, if you're a gay priest, you want other gay men to enter the priesthood because you know that is one of the only ways a gay man in the church can do good for their community, you know, in the sense that, because I remember as I was leaving, I was talking to a gay Jesuit who did a lot of ministry in the hospitals in Boston, who was kind of you know, kind of a friend, you know. You know, it's kind of sad once you leave the Jesuits, they all think this kind of line, which is, you know, you're dead to us. You don't really exist anymore. And so, you know, I lost a lot of relationships with a lot of good men after I left. But, you know, I do remember before I left, I was talking to this one gay guy, one gay Jesuit. And, you know, again, he works in the hospital systems in Boston. And, you know, and I was saying to him, you know, this is why I'm leaving. And he said, well, you know, your departure, well, that negates all the work I've done. You know, you're a gay man. What do you think? I'm a gay man and I'm a gay priest, and you think that what I've done for our community is nothing? And I said to myself, well, what have you really done for your community? You know, you're a closeted gay priest who happens to live in sort of a gayer area in Boston because there's one house in that sort of location. You're like, what have you done? Like, maybe you've been more pastoral, or maybe you've not been so hardcore with your exegesis or your hermeneutic and your homily, and, you know, taking people to task, and, you know, sort of been a moral critic. But what have you done? Like, what have you done that you should be heralded as a role model for gay people or straight people? If anything, you're being very cowardly.
Agreed. And actually, you know, I'm coming at it from a place of, you know, I grew up a Catholic and was gay, and, you know, experienced what the Catholic Church were saying about gay people, and it made me distant. I was an altar boy. I sang in the choir. I played the piano in the choir. You know, I did loads of church-related stuff, and I came from a very religious background. But ultimately, the hypocrisy and the cowardness, or cowardliness, that I saw just jarred with me. And one of my triggers in life is any form of injustice, and I could not marry the message of love and peace and the least of us, and the least, you know, the first should be last, and the least among us, and, you know, all of these things, and the teachings of Jesus, which is often what I say to people who have an organized religion. Is that what Jesus would have said?
Right.
There is a huge cavernous void between these two worlds, and I can't cope or, you know, accept that hypocrisy.
And the other thing is,
How
it's,
did
you
you
know,
balance that?
it's not even, if I may, it's not even two worlds, because not every Roman Catholic church or institution has a place for gay or lesbian people, you know, or LGBT, because we really can't even talk about transgender or bisexual or queer. We really can only talk about lesbian and gay. But my point is, you know, to say that there's two worlds really gives more credit to an institution where there really isn't a world for gay or lesbian men and women. You know, when has the Pope said these people contribute positively to the faith environment? When has a bishop said this gay teacher who I just heard about getting fired in Philadelphia, well, she was very talented, and she could, in her role as chemistry teacher and you know, person, help form the children? No, instead they're fired. They're sent to the margins. They're sent to the borders. And yes, those are the people that deserve the most attention. And when I was leaving the Jesuits, my brother said, "Oh, you know, Ben, you should stay, and you should look at the poor, and the poor are the ones who need you." Well, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people, you know, of indigenous, you know, people of color, all of these people need our attention. But, you know, gays and lesbians are not fully welcome to the Roman Catholic faith community. They're just not. And anyone who says otherwise, you know, is just wants people to come to the pew and come and come and come. And would they say to Rosa Parks, you know, sit down, it's not time to stand up and find your seat anywhere on the bus? You know, I mean, the way in which gays and lesbians are sort of othered in the church, you know, and continue to have no place is just a shame.
Well, here's the thing though, Ben. So, right, I was very offended years ago by a statement that I heard an extended family member say, not my immediate family, but an extended family member. My immediate family are incredibly supportive.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't like the rules, don't join the club. What would you say to that?
Well, in what sense? Like, don't join the club of the priesthood, or don't join the club of the church?
Well, either, but you know, you're a gay person. They've made their position really clear. They've made their doctrine really clear. The statements you just referenced are perfect examples of their position. And you want to join them because you did know other gay priests.
Yeah.
You were talking openly about homosexuality, yours and theirs.
Right.
You were having sex with priests.
Yeah, I had.
The church knows, because it knew with you, that it's allowing gay men into the priesthood, right? But it's comfortable in the fact that when you get in, you're celibate, so it's okay.
Yeah.
You're not acting on it, so you're kind of castrated. I wanted to talk about your views and your feelings about the sex scandals that follow the Catholic Church. It seems to be a pandemic within this organization. It was so un-Christ-like.
Yeah.
When you couldn't do the eulogy at your own mother's funeral.
Yeah, my family's like, I am not a member of the Roman Catholic Church anymore. And I don't have to answer that question because
you mentioned they tried to ban it, or they tried to censor you again, or whatever went on. Yeah. What is it they don't want you to say?
You know, and the sky didn't fall, and you know, Jesus didn't, you know, threaten my life. So don't withdraw. You know, look for balance, look for hope, look for those people that give you life.